The state banquet was meant to be a night of polished smiles, royal tradition, and family unity. But everything changed in one quiet moment when Princess Catherine spotted the brooch on Camilla's gown. It wasn't just similar to Diana's, it was Diana's brooch. To Catherine, it was a deeply personal piece that should never have been worn without real meaning, permission, or respect. Then Catherine did the unthinkable. Before we reveal what this could mean for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any updates.
This is also a time of change for my family. I count on the loving help of my darling wife, Camilla. In recognition of her own loyal public service since our marriage 17 years ago, she becomes my queen consort.
Catherine didn't blink or look away. She sat completely still, as if the shock had reached her before she could even react. Across the table, Camilla noticed the stare and instinctively touched the brooch. William caught the moment immediately. He looked from his wife to the jewel, and his expression changed. This wasn't just jewelry, it was a powerful reminder of Diana and the grief still tied to her memory. This banquet wasn't an ordinary dinner. It was a major royal event meant to display friendship, strength, and national pride. King Charles wanted the evening to project calm and unity after weeks of private tension. Catherine understood the importance of the occasion, but she also knew the price of staying silent. If no one reacted, Diana's memory could once again disappear behind royal tradition. Beneath the table, William quietly reached for Catherine's hand, not to stop her, but to support her. Catherine felt William's hand and gently pulled away. That small movement told him everything. She wasn't acting out of anger, she was acting from deep pain.
I know she will bring to the demands of her new role the steadfast devotion to duty on which I have come to rely so much.
Camilla looked down at the brooch, then back up, and her expression shifted. She knew Catherine had recognized it instantly. Charles noticed too, and for the first time that evening, the king's calm expression began to crack. The room fell into an uneasy silence. Catherine stood, and every eye turned toward her. The service stopped. Guests looked at the head table. William rose a moment later, close enough to show his support, but giving Catherine the space to speak for herself. Then she made the request no one expected. She asked for the service to stop. Camilla froze, and Charles immediately realized the situation had become serious. This wasn't just a break from royal protocol. The brooch had brought Diana's memory back into the spotlight in a way no one had anticipated. To everyone in the room, the brooch carried a different meaning. To Camilla, it represented royal acceptance. To Charles, it was a reminder of a complicated past. To William, it reflected the lasting memory of his mother. And to Catherine, it marked a boundary that had been crossed in front of the world. Catherine stayed composed, but the emotion showed on her face. She had always honored Diana's memory with respect, never using it for attention or turning grief into a public display. William's jaw tightened as he looked at the brooch. To him, it was never just a piece of jewelry. It carried the weight of his mother's legacy. In the palace, a brooch could send a powerful message, and this one carried old pain. The state banquet was meant to show unity before world leaders and honored guests. Instead, one small piece of jewelry changed the mood of the entire room. Camilla tried to stay calm. She lifted her chin and acted as if nothing had happened, but her hand gave her away. She reached for the brooch, then quickly pulled her fingers back after realizing people had noticed. She may have hoped the jewel would symbolize acceptance and healing. Instead, it seemed to reopen a deeply personal wound.
You and your brother both directly asked your dad not to marry Camilla.
Yes.
Why?
We didn't think it was necessary. We thought that it was going to cause more harm than good, and that if he was now with his person, that surely that's enough.
Charles shifted in his seat and his discomfort became clear. He knew the brooch had already been part of difficult private discussions within the family. He also knew Catherine would never interrupt royal protocol without a serious reason. Looking from William to Camilla, the king realized the past had returned at the worst possible moment. Catherine's sadness quickly turned into determination. One glance at William told her she understood exactly what she was feeling. He didn't need to speak. His quiet expression showed the weight of the moment and gave her the strength to remain standing while the room expected silence. Then Sophie quietly leaned towards Catherine and spoke in a low voice. She warned that this wasn't the first time the brooch had raised concerns. Catherine said nothing, but her expression changed. William noticed, Charles noticed, even Camilla sensed it. That quiet warning pointed to an earlier family gathering where Diana's personal jewelry had been reviewed ahead of a future memorial tribute. Catherine had made one request: the brooch should remain untouched until William decided what should happen to it. But during a private family gathering, a request from Camilla changed everything.
With Catherine beside him, our new Prince and Princess of Wales will, I know, continue to inspire and lead our national conversations, helping to bring the marginal to the centre ground, where vital help can be given.
The meeting at Kensington was small, quiet, and focused on planning a memorial tribute to Diana. Every detail mattered because it honored her life and legacy. William arrived already carrying the weight of painful memories. For him, anything connected to his mother was never just history. It was personal loss that had never fully faded. Sophie stayed close to Catherine, quietly watching the room. She understood the family's private struggles and knew the brooch was far more than part of the royal collection. It represented memory, tradition, and deep emotion.
When a sealed velvet case was placed on the table, Catherine looked at William. He didn't reach for it, he simply stared, and his silence revealed how much it still affected him.
I'm 75 now, and I can't remember anybody except the Queen bee.
Camilla wasn't present at the beginning of the meeting, but her name soon came up. According to a reported palace briefing, she asked Charles if she could wear Diana's brooch at the upcoming state banquet as a gesture of unity. Catherine saw it differently. To her, true unity couldn't come from wearing something so closely tied to another person's painful history. That same evening, William told Charles the brooch should remain unworn until he personally decided its place in Diana's legacy. The king listened carefully, but gave no clear answer.
She was the villain. She was the third person in the marriage. She needed to rehabilitate her image.
Charles's silence hurt Catherine more than a direct refusal. She understood how the palace often avoided firm answers, but this felt different. The king knew how sensitive the brooch was, yet he never fully closed the door. Sophie later shared details of the discussion, leaving Catherine deeply troubled. It wasn't that Camilla wanted dignity, it was that the brooch seemed to represent someone else's painful legacy. William left the meeting visibly shaken, carrying his emotions without saying much. That's why the banquet became so difficult for Catherine. The moment she saw the brooch on Camilla's gown, she realized the family's earlier concerns had been ignored. When Catherine stood, it wasn't a sudden decision. It came from remembering what she believed had been promised. The room fell silent. She didn't raise her voice or lose her composure. Instead, she looked directly at Camilla and quietly asked, "Why are you wearing it?" The question echoed across the room and changed the mood instantly. This wasn't just any royal dinner, it was one of the monarchy's most important state banquets, held to honor foreign guests and present an image of unity. Stopping the movement carried enormous weight, and everyone present could feel the tension. Camilla tried to respond with calm confidence. She lifted her chin and began explaining the brooch as part of her formal outfit, but her voice tightened before she finished. Many guests didn't understand the history behind the jewel, but those closest to the family certainly did. Catherine knew, William knew, Charles knew. That shared understanding made the silence feel even heavier. William slowly stood beside Catherine. He didn't interrupt her or try to calm the moment. He simply stood close enough to show she wasn't facing it alone. The pain on his face was impossible to hide. This wasn't just about a brooch, it was about his mother's memory. Without raising his voice, Charles quietly told Camilla to remove it. The order was calm but clear. Camilla hesitated for a brief moment, and that pause changed everything. Catherine saw it and felt her disbelief grow. William's expression hardened. Even Charles realized the hesitation made the situation far worse. Catherine wanted respect, but she also wanted honesty. Part of her wanted to sit down and let the evening continue. Another part knew that staying silent would only make the moment harder to accept. She held Camilla's gaze and refused to back away. At last, Camilla reached for the brooch, but the tension had already spread across the room. Her hand shook slightly, revealing more than words could. Guests had expected a display of royal unity. Instead, they witnessed an uncomfortable family moment. Then Princess Anne stepped quietly towards Charles. She didn't offer comfort. In a low voice, she warned, this was no longer about jewelry. This was about judgment. After those words, the palace no longer viewed the banquet as a simple incident. It had become a serious test of leadership and authority. Catherine had no crown and no formal authority over royal protocol, but in that room she held something just as powerful. She carried William's trust, the memory of Diana, and the public image of the future monarchy. Charles recognized that shift almost immediately. The king still held the crown and its official authority, but influence inside a family doesn't always follow titles. That night, Catherine's actions carried real weight because she defended a memory that meant so much to William and to many others. William stood beside her, knowing that saying nothing could have been seen as turning his back on his mother's legacy. After the banquet, Catherine sat quietly in a private room. She remained calm, but stood by what she had done. She knew the palace would focus on protocol, public appearances, and headlines. To her, though respect for Diana's memory mattered more than ceremony.
William later spoke with Charles in a measured but emotional conversation. He told the king that Catherine had protected the family rather than embarrassed it. In his view, she had stopped a painful situation from becoming even more damaging. Charles listened, but he had no easy response. Princess Anne also supported Catherine. She reminded Charles that symbols can leave a deeper impact.
Allegations regarding the misuse of royal association through Meghan's Archwell Foundation are now under legal review.
Anne believed Diana's legacy remained deeply meaningful, and as palace officials worked to contain the growing controversy, that reality could no longer be ignored. Palace officials described the brooch as a symbol of reconciliation, meant to show peace between the past and present, but Sophie quietly challenged that idea. She reminded everyone that reconciliation cannot be forced. If William had not agreed and Catherine had not accepted it, then it couldn't truly represent unity. Instead, it looked like pressure presented as kindness. Charles glanced at the papers in front of him, then pushed them aside. He realized a full review of Diana's personal items and the approvals behind their use might reveal uncomfortable answers. Even so, he ordered it. Every decision connected to Diana's jewelry had to be examined. That order changed everything. The question was no longer why Camilla wore the brooch, it was who had approved it. By midnight, the palace halls had fallen into an uneasy silence. Staff moved carefully, speaking only when necessary. Although the banquet continued, everyone knew the real story had already unfolded. Camilla had removed the brooch. Catherine never returned to her original seat. William stayed by her side, knowing her calm strength came at a personal cost. Afterward, Camilla sat alone. She looked at the empty spot on her gown where the brooch had been, and its absence seemed to say more than the jewel ever could. She had hoped it would represent acceptance. Instead, it became a symbol of hurt and left her facing difficult questions. Palace staff quickly prepared an official explanation for guests, hoping to ease the tension without revealing the full story. But Charles knew carefully chosen words couldn't erase what had happened. As he reviewed the approval records, his expression grew more serious. William later examined the same file. He had expected to find one private request or one mistaken decision. Instead, he discovered that several people had been involved before the brooch was worn. That made the situation feel far less accidental and much harder to dismiss. Catherine made a decision of her own. She didn't ask for another palace briefing or more official explanations. Instead, she requested a private conversation with Camilla, without aides, guards, or anyone else in the room. William heard the request and fell silent. Charles looked older than he had all evening. Camilla lowered her eyes. In that private meeting, the focus shifted away from royal protocol. There were no prepared statements or formal roles left to hide behind, only the emotions the banquet had brought into the open. Catherine and Camilla faced each other, not as future queen and queen consort, but as two women connected by Diana's lasting legacy. For the first time that evening, the tension gave way to something even more powerful: honesty. Catherine entered the private sitting room with a calm expression, though the weight of the evening remained clear. Away from the banquet and the public eye, there were no titles or formal traditions to hide behind. This conversation was personal. William waited quietly outside the door. He refused to interrupt, but he couldn't walk away. He knew the brooch represented memories that had shaped his life. Charles also stayed back, understanding that his authority could not solve what had become a deeply emotional moment. Catherine looked at Camilla and spoke gently but firmly. She explained that Diana's brooch should not be used as a symbol of unity while it still carried such personal meaning. She didn't raise her voice. Her calm words were enough. She told Camilla that real unity cannot be created by wearing something so closely connected to another person's grief. It must be built with patience and respect. Camilla tried to explain that she had hoped the brooch would represent acceptance and healing, but her confidence faded as she spoke. Catherine listened before quietly replying, "Acceptance cannot come from someone else's grief. It cannot simply be pinned on a gown and presented as peace." Camilla lowered her eyes. Without another word, she opened the case holding the brooch and slowly lifted it out, as if its weight had become impossible to ignore.
Camilla placed the brooch on the table between them and quietly said she would never wear it again. Catherine didn't smile. She simply nodded. The promise couldn't undo the pain, but it could prevent the same mistake from happening again. Moments later, William entered and immediately saw the brooch resting on the table. He didn't ask what had been said. He didn't have to. Catherine's expression told him enough, and Camilla's silence confirmed it. The conversation had changed everything. But outside the palace, the story was already growing into something much bigger. By the next morning, images from the banquet were everywhere. Photos of Camilla, Catherine, and William spread quickly, and many people believed they had witnessed a deeply personal royal conflict. Diana's memory was once again at the center of public attention. One major newspaper ran a striking front-page headline, "The Brooch That Stopped the Palace." The story presented Catherine not as someone causing trouble, but as someone protecting Diana's legacy when others remained silent. William understood the risks immediately. Public support could strengthen Catherine's position, but it could also reopen painful family memories that had never fully healed. Outside Kensington Palace, people left white flowers by the gates as a quiet tribute to Diana. The growing display turned the story into more than royal headlines. It became a reminder that for many, Diana's memory still carried deep emotion, while Camilla faced increasing public pressure. The Queen Consort appeared subdued as she left a private chapel service later that day. Cameras captured her serious expression, and many believed the weight of the controversy was impossible to hide.
She had hoped for acceptance, but much of the public saw the brooch as a sign of disrespect. Instead of unity, people questioned why Diana's jewelry had been worn without clear support from William or Catherine. Charles acted quickly, approving a palace statement announcing tighter rules for the future use of items connected to Diana. The announcement did more than explain palace policy. It signaled that the monarchy recognized the sensitivity of the situation and that changes would be made. A broadcaster summed up the controversy with one memorable line: "This was not a jewelry mistake, it was a memory mistake." The phrase spread quickly because it reflected how many people viewed the moment. For them, Diana's legacy remained deeply important, and Catherine was seen as protecting that legacy. Camilla responded by keeping a lower profile. Catherine did not celebrate the public reaction, and William understood that the family's future had taken another unexpected turn. When the attention finally eased, one message remained. The banquet had ended, but its impact had not. Charles was reminded that old family wounds could not be managed by protocol alone, while William saw Catherine become a determined protector of Diana's memory, choosing respect and dignity over silence. Catherine did not ask for Camilla to be embarrassed or publicly punished. She wanted one clear boundary: Diana's most personal jewelry would never again be used without the family's agreement. William supported that decision immediately. He believed it protected his mother's memory and helped safeguard the future of the monarchy. In his view, public trust depended on treating personal loss with respect, not as a symbol for public appearances. Catherine had done what few others were willing to do. She interrupted a royal event not to divide the family, but to defend what she believed mattered most. Charles approved the new restriction in silence. The king realized the brooch had exposed a much deeper problem. It showed that careful planning and royal tradition could not overcome unresolved emotions. Camilla accepted the new rule without argument. She understood the controversy had cost her far more than a difficult evening. It had changed how the family would handle Diana's personal legacy going forward. The night reminded everyone that acceptance cannot be demanded, and peace cannot be worn like jewelry. What was meant to close an old chapter instead showed that Diana's memory still carried deep meaning. Later, Princess Anne found Catherine and spoke with quiet honesty. She told her that her actions were not defiance, they were stewardship. In protecting Diana's memory, Catherine had also protected trust, respect, and the future of the monarchy. At last, Catherine felt a sense of peace. The pain hadn't disappeared, but she knew she had refused to let it be ignored. The monarchy moved forward, yet the banquet left a lasting lesson. True dignity comes from respecting the past, not rewriting it. The image of Catherine standing while everyone else remained seated became the moment many would remember most. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with others. We'd also love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below and let us know what you think. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.